The CDC eviction moratorium, we've been following this thing this week because it was supposed to expire. In fact, this has been extended many, many times. What we're talking about here is people are living in homes, living in rental properties, and they have been living there for some period of time and evidently not paying their rent to their landlords. So it'd be like you going and saying, yes, I'd love to live here. Thank you very much. I'm agreeing to pay you $1,000 a month rent. And then suddenly you stop paying your rent and the government comes back down and says, well, you can't be thrown out of that property anymore because of why? COVID, because everything is based on COVID these days. So this has been going on for some time. We talked about this earlier in the week. This has been granted, extended many, many times ever since COVID started, and it just got extended again. Many people were finally saying, oh gosh, finally, we're going to be able to get back to exercising our property rights without having the government sort of seize those away from us and justify it on the back of COVID. And we're going to see a little bit of a return to form, a return to order where property rights are valued and appreciated. And it was supposed to expire. It didn't. So we're going to go through a quick crash course refresh on what's happening with this case now that we have that background. Remember, the extensions kept being granted. The CDC every month or so said, we got more COVID, so we need more extensions. We can't throw people out of their homes, even though they're not paying their rent indefinitely. And so there's no limiting principle here. So finally, the Supreme Court got really tired of these continuances and came out and said, hey, you can't continue to do this. This was the Supreme Court order. The pertinent line here is down at the bottom. It says, in my view, if you want additional continuations of the eviction, you need clear and specific congressional authorization to do it. The CDC must get it from Congress to extend the moratorium past July 31st. Of course, that was just a few days ago, and many people in Congress didn't even care about that. The Supreme Court spoke, said you need congressional approval. What did Congress have to say about that? Congress said, well, we don't care. Here's Maxine Waters. She says, well, okay, nobody cares about what SCOTUS says. She says, I don't buy that the CDC can't extend the moratorium. Who's going to stop them? Who's going to penalize them? There's no official ruling that they cannot do it, even though I just read it to you. She says, come on, CDC, have a heart, just do it. And so the CDC, as we know, did it. They just went ahead and did it. Even though SCOTUS said there's really no constitutional underpinnings, even though the White House, through Press Secretary Jen Psaki, said that according to us, the White House, ourselves, even CDC Director Rochelle Walensky and her team have been unable to find legal authority for a new and targeted eviction moratorium. We're redoubling our efforts to find what we can find. And of course, there is nothing there. SCOTUS said so. White House acknowledged it. Joe Biden acknowledged it. Many other people have acknowledged it. But the White House did it anyways. Why is this problematic? Well, of course, it's because it's the executive branch that is making these decisions, and you don't vote for these people. Nobody voted for Rochelle Walensky. She's been sort of appointed there. She made it into Biden's cabinet, is delegated power through the Health and Human Services branch. She is one of the directors in HHS, and she is in control of the CDC. And now she just issues orders whenever she wants, apparently, even in violation of what SCOTUS says. The Supreme Court says there's no basis for this. She went ahead and did it anyways. You can see this here. This order came out. Summary, the CDC is now issuing a new order, like a little dictator, that she is just going to make this changes anyway. It says, according to this, you shall not evict any covered person from any residential property in any county or U.S. territory while the country is experiencing substantial or high levels of community transmission of COVID. And so the limiting principle there, are we ever going to be in low transmissions of COVID anymore, right? It's sort of, I think, here to stay. And is the CDC just going to continue to indefinitely grant people the ability to seize property, to live in property, to use property, to convert the property of somebody else into their own without any compensation for it? Yeah, the CDC said no problem at all. We know SCOTUS doesn't like that, but that's just too bad. We're going to do it. Why? COVID. We're going to move elections around. We're going to collect ballots after the deadlines. We're going to justify waiving signature ballots and everything. We're actually going to lock you in your homes so that you can't go out and enjoy a little bit of that American freedom and participate in your businesses because of COVID. All of your civil liberties are slowly being watered away, and you know it, right? It's not hyperbolic. It's actually happening right in front of our very eyes. And so you're going to see the cascading effects of this as they continue to unfold. And it's not just me saying that this is insane, this is illegal, this is unconstitutional. Even The jokers at the Washington Post acknowledge it. We talked about this yesterday. His novel evictions defense. Maybe it's illegal, but it's worth it, right? So we know where this is going. We know the media is trying to cover for this unlawful administration. And what's going to happen about it? Well, we're going to take a look at it. Now it's going back through the district courts. We're going to look at what the Alabama Association of Realtors are upset about and go through their lawsuit, because they've been sort of at the forefront of this. It was their case that worked its way up to the Supreme Court in the first place. And so they filed an emergency motion explaining why this is problematic and asking the court to vacate that unlawful, unconstitutional order. And so we're going to go through that. Before I do, I want to play this clip. This gentleman from North Carolina was on Fox and Friends. I think this was this morning, and he's just he's telling about some of his troubles, right? He's just a landlord, somebody who has a rental property, somebody who is sort of generating value in the world by creating other places for people to live, entering into a contract with them that he's going to provide that for them, and they are going to pay their rents until the government says, oh, you actually don't have to pay your rents and there are no consequences for that. You can just stay there indefinitely, and then you're going to have all of these additional burdens that the landlords have to pay. Remember, this is an infringement on their property rights. This is the government saying you had a right before. If those renters didn't pay their bills, you had recourse. You could evict them. Now there is no limitation to that. And so many people will say, well, there are provisions where they can go get back rent and they can go, sue them or whatever. That puts the collectability problem on the backs of the property owners. That's saying that the government, if the government is going to make all of these people whole, it's their obligation to do it. And they have failed to do that because the government is incompetent. They're not capable of micromanaging 7 million transactions and making sure that they can be like little parents for all of the people. Did you pay your rent this week? Did you pay your rent this week? They're not going to be able to do that and disperse the funds in a way that's going to be meaningful. And so it's their burden here. Just compensation, they're not providing that. They're saying that the property owners at some point are going to get it. But listen to this, gentlemen. Listen what's happening. Property owners are living large at his expense, on his dollar. And the government just said, well, sorry about that. We're going to continue to do it because we need that house more than you do. Here it is from Fox and Friends.
And the bad part, the one thing that wasn't shown in that, the guy didn't pay me rent, and evidently he was getting money from somewhere, and he had 3 boats. Well, lo and behold, the middle of the summer, their air conditioner went out. And so I had to put about a $4,500 heat pump on that house to make sure that they stayed cool. And I didn't receive any rent or anything. So, it goes way beyond the loss of rental income. We're still bound by county rules and laws. We have to maintain the property.
Yeah, it's infuriating. I told the story when I was in Cuba. Something like this happened, and I mean, this was something that we heard from somebody who lived in Cuba, and they said, telling us the history of what happened there. And I've told the story here on the channel before, but the idea was in Cuba there might have been somebody that had a 5-bedroom house, right? It might have been Mr. Rob and Mrs. Rob at some point with no kids. You got a 5-bedroom house for 2 people. Well, at one point in time, that might have been allowed there. And and after the revolution, after that was seen as something that was unequal, they decided to make a change. You have 4 extra bedrooms. You don't need all 5. You need 1 bedroom. There's 2 of you. You can use 1. We have other people here that need those rooms more than you do. And so the government just said they're living with you now, right? And I went through here when we talked about when Viva Cuba and Cuba Libertad was going on. I went through the photographs of the Cuban buildings, and you can see where the property divisions would take place, where somebody would care about their property and somebody else that had no real property interest in that facility would just let it crumble and fall to pieces. And so the same thing is happening right now on the back of the government. They're saying that we need that property more than you do, landlord. And there are going to be people who are living there with boats, just kind of enjoying it. It's a windfall for many of them that they're not going to have to pay back. And the government is allowing this to happen. And it's a slow watering down of your property rights. You have that is this man's property, and the government is taking it from him. So totally irresponsible, totally illegal, and unconstitutional. And fortunately, we have some people in this country who still have some backbones. This is from the National Association of Realtors. They say that they are filing an emergency lawsuit. We have the Alabama and Georgia Associations of Realtors. They filed an emergency motion Wednesday night with Judge Dabney Friedrich out of the U.S. District Court. We're going to look at this motion here in a second, as well as the court docket. We have state associations with the National Associations of Realtors. They brought a lawsuit in fall of 2020. They challenged this originally. This was the case that worked its way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you got a good point. This is a non-legislative body that continues to pass these extensions. That's not constitutional. Friedrich ruled with the housing providers, but put her ruling on hold pending an appeal, which ultimately kept the moratorium in place. So, housing providers asked the D.C. Circuit Court to lift the stay so that they could stop the moratorium, petition the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene, and then end the ban immediately. On June 29th, a majority of the Supreme Court indicated that the CDC lacked authority to implement a national eviction moratorium. The High Court allowed the ban to expire at the end of July, stated that any further extension would need congressional authorization. We've talked about that. July 31st was supposed to be the end of it. June 29th, they had plenty of notice about this. AOC, Cori Bush, all of the other Democrats who got evicted from the House and they were sleeping on the steps of the Capitol building, they knew this was coming. Nancy Pelosi knew this was coming. Joe Biden knew this was coming. And so they were all just sort of, oh, well, we can't do anything. And then it's slowly being revealed that they're just going to dump this all back on the Supreme Court. In a brilliant strategy, if I can say so myself, they're going to say, well, the court really put the limit on this. And now the court is going to be evicting 7 million people as soon as they find this to be unconstitutional, and that's going to give the Democrats a beautiful scapegoat, and they're going to be able to sort of justify packing the court at that moment in time, because the very evil conservative Supreme Court is upholding the Constitution, but by their manipulation of that consequence, it's going to be reframed as they're throwing 7 million people out of their homes. Blame landlords or slumlords, or blame capitalism and the really draconian landlords who have no empathy for the poor people in this country. That's where it's going to go. So they have actually renewed a motion. Let's go over to the court docket here from Alabama. We can see that it says on August 3rd, we have a notice. Okay, now, so I mentioned this. This is kind of fun, actually. We have a notice here from Alex William Barr, Centers for Disease Control, Robert Redfield, U.S. Department of Health, and Nina Witowski, Myers and Stevens. Okay, so they filed this notice. And remember what we talked about, I think it might have even been yesterday, where we said that the CDC here was not asking for permission. They're just going to do it, and they're going to beg for forgiveness later down the line. So they know what the court said. Everybody knows what the court said. And the CDC said, well, we don't have any constitutional authority. We got your order. Jen Psaki was acknowledging it. Joe Biden was acknowledging it. We have no ability to do this. They did it anyways because they're not asking for permission. They're going to be begging for forgiveness, but they don't even care about forgiveness because they're making the pitch that the Supreme Court is illegitimate. And this is priming the pump for them to pack the courts. So what they did here is they said, well, we're just going to give you notice. We know what you said, that this is unconstitutional and we need congressional authorization, but we're going to do it anyways. And here's a little bit of notice for you. So they're just going to that's it, just notice. So we're going to take a look at how they're saying, excuse me, court, excuse me, we're taking your order and cramming it back down in your face. We don't care what you said. We're going to do it anyways. Here's our notice that we're doing it. So we're going to look at that. Then we have the next day on August 4th, we have an emergency motion to enforce the Supreme Court's ruling. The realtors come back and say, all we're asking for here is that court, you enforce what the Supreme Court said, the highest court in the land. We're asking you to just enforce their order. They want to vacate the stay pending the appeal by the Alabama Association of Realtors. So we'll take a look at that as well. For the lawyers out there, if you want to find this case, here is the case number. That's down there in the slides as well. Okay, so we're going to start off by looking at the notice, right? This is where the CDC comes back and they say, yeah, Judge, we got it. We know we're not supposed to do this, but we're doing it anyways. They say notice filed on 8/3, the same day that they announced the policy. Excuse me, court. Defendants respectfully notify the court that on July 31st, CDC eviction moratorium that is the subject of this lawsuit, it expired. Yeah, we know that. And you didn't do anything about it. But they said on August 3rd, however, the CDC issued a new order entitled Temporary Halt in Residential Evictions. Why? Because it determined it was necessary, especially in light of a recent spread caused by the Delta variant. Oh, and they link you to gousa.gov. Yeah. Unlike the other previous order, this order applies exclusively in areas experiencing substantial or high transmission. Okay, so you see what's happening here? They use this one sentence to justify their non-following of the order. Unlike the previous order, this one applies exclusively to areas experiencing high or substantial transmission. Applies through October 3rd. Respectfully submitted here, Your Honor, by Brian Boynton and Eric Beckenhauer, two acting assistant attorney generals and the assistant director of the federal programs bench, signed off on here by Stephen Myers, all lawyers, in my opinion, who are breaking their oaths to the Constitution by filing this very clearly unconstitutional document, but that's their prerogative. They're free to do that. And I'm sure they don't believe that, so whatever. Anyways, the point here, this is what they said. We're going to break the Constitution. Here's our receipt for that. Here you go, Judge, because they just have to notify them of that. So they provided their notice. We'll see what the court has to say about it. Now, the Association of Realtors, they came in and they filed this response: the emergency motion to enforce the court's ruling, the Supreme Court's ruling, and to vacate the stay pending the appeal. Right? So they want anything that is preventing them from lifting the moratorium for allowing evictions to proceed to go away. Okay, we're talking about vacating the stay pending an appeal and all of these different legal terms. They want the ability for evictions to start again. And currently, there is a current order from an executive branch. The Supreme Court said you can't do that, and so they need somebody to clear this up. They're starting down here at the U.S. District Court, and they're going to work their way back up. This is the Alabama Association's argument. They're saying, hey, listen, this is why we need you to do this. The CDC, this is their fourth extension of the eviction moratorium until October. It conflicts directly with the Supreme Court's ruling saying they could not do this beyond July 31st. After the court entered final judgment, the eviction moratorium, they said it's unambiguously foreclosed by the plain language of the Public Health Service Act, right? So they're giving us some legal basis here. Justice Kavanaugh explained in his order that they need clear and specific congressional authorization via new legislation, specifically in there. As that date approached, the White House as well repeatedly stated that the Supreme Court's ruling had unequivocally blocked the CDC from extending eviction moratorium through executive action. Taking a cue from Justice Kavanaugh's controlling and concurrence, Congress attempted to pass legislation but failed. After Congress failed to extend, the Speaker of the House and others demanded that the CDC extend the moratorium through executive action. Anyways, even though it's unconstitutional, then we came out a tidal wave of political pressure put upon the CDC. One member of Congress, I don't know why she is still a member of Congress, because this has been something that she's had a lot of difficulty with, sort of getting her foot out of her mouth. But this is Maxine Waters, says, who is going to stop them? Who is going to penalize them? CDC held firm for a few days with support from the White House, saying that the Supreme Court ruling had tied the CDC's hands. But then on August 3rd, the CDC caved to political pressure by extending the moratorium without any legal basis other than, it's highly transmissible. And this order is a little bit different because we got that one sentence there that said, well, this applies to areas where there's substantial or highly, transmissible numbers. That was their legal basis. They didn't address the unconstitutionality of what SCOTUS was implying. They did not say anything about, separation of powers argument or have any underpinnings anywhere. I showed you what the notice said. It's it. One paragraph. We did it because we had to do it. Nothing substantive there at all. All right. In substance and effect, the CDC's latest action is an extension of the same unlawful bans that we had previously. We need another source of authority. They go back to Section 361 of the Public Health Acts. They say that the CDC's recasting of the latest extension, which covers 90% of renters across the country, while leaving intact its ability to ratchet it up to 100%, is a distinction without a difference because it has no bearing on the CDC's legal authority, which is exactly what I just said. It's the idea that the CDC justified this new order on the basis of they're distinguishing it from their old order. It's not the same as our old order. This is different, Supreme Court. We know that you said we couldn't do that one again. We're not doing that one again. We're doing something different. The other one applied to 100% of the country. This one applies to 90%. The Association of Realtors are saying they had no ability to do it in the first place. They couldn't pass the 100% because there's no constitutional underpinning to do so. So the CDC comes back out and says, well, okay, so we know, but we're just going to reduce it from 100 to 90. That's going to make it a little bit different. And they're going to try to skate that one through the courts. And so the judge will say, I told you you can't do that. And they're going to turn around and say, yeah, but we're not doing that. We're doing this. Huh, judge? You know, if that was like your 12-year-old, right? That kid is grounded for that childish argument. But the CDC just going to make it. All right, this court, according to the Realtors, they're telling us this court should immediately vacate the CDC's fourth extension because it conflicts with the Supreme Court's ruling. A majority of the Supreme Court made clear that this was exceeding the CDC's statutory authority, could not be extended beyond July 31st. This vindicates the court's rulings. The Supreme Court was not ambiguous at all. The White House acknowledged their ruling. The CDC acknowledged the ruling. But they did it anyways. They're saying that this court should now enforce this ruling by vacating the August 3rd extension. So like literally taking the CDC's order and just flushing it down the toilet, or simply clarifying under the original order that covers it, vacating this order of the May 14th that was granting. So they're actually saying they want to go back all the way to May. That order, get rid of that order first. They want expedited rulings. They say, this is all needs to happen quickly because there's a lot of political pressure that is well underway. The court should block August 3 extension on an expedited basis to relieve the nation's property owners of the burden of complying with this unlawful agency action. Yeah, there's a huge burden for this. That's sort of what's so mind-blowing about this thing. It's like, they have extra houses. They're not using them, so we can just throw a bunch of people in there and not have them pay their rent and have those landlords continue to prop them up, non-paying renters for indefinitely with no end in sight. People don't recognize how traumatic not having certainty is for business owners. It is a huge stinking problem, and that applies to residential and real estate owners, right? People who are using these properties to cash flow other things that they're trying to do and be productive with in society. The government comes in and says, no, you're gone, right? There are many people that this is their business. They are property companies. They maintain properties full time. And they're all just being, sorry, it's your fault. And if it's not your fault, it's the state's fault. So regardless, the government is screwing you any which way you look. And the citizens, I guess, are the evil people, these landlords, for wanting to maintain their property rights. Give me a break. All right, here's the argument. It says all parties agree. Supreme Court's ruling blocked the CDC from extending the moratorium because clear and specific authorization is needed. No question that the fourth extension conflicts directly with the Supreme Court's ruling because Congress did not pass new legislation authorizing another extension. See how simple this is? Look at this. It's like one paragraph. The only question is what this court should do about it. The court, they say, should enforce the Supreme Court's ruling by vacating the August 3rd extension from the CDC and stay the pending appeal, restore the status quo that a majority of the Supreme Court expected to exist after July 31st. It's good stuff. Here's the conclusion. This was written here by Brett Shumate over from D.C. in the D.C. Circuit Court, August 4th. And we also have a quick note that the order, this was received on August 4th. We have a new minute entry now on August 5th that says that the defendants here, which is going to be the CDC, they shall file any opposition to the emergency motion before August 6th at 9 a.m. All right. And the plaintiffs shall file any reply before August 6th at 7 p.m. So the notice of appearance by John Robb. Okay, so all of that is additional. So let's take a look at some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I saw some super chats come in as well. Let's see what we've got coming in here. We'll start off with the form and see what we've got. All right, we got some questions coming in hot. We're going to get started here with I'm Not Gas says, did Trump know about COVID years early? Kofafefi is COVID for everyone forever. A Clockwork Elf told me about this on my last DMT trip. Well, yeah, that's it. He might be a man from the future, Donald Trump. he is a bit pretty prescient on a lot of other issues. We have Hugh Janis. Hugh Janis is here in the house, says, I love this moratorium extension. I troll my landlords on Twitter, so I live in their heads rent-free while I live in their home rent-free. So that's okay. Are we getting trollers on here? We're gonna have to change the form. We have Vienticus Prime is here, says, I just thought it would be prudent to point out a couple statistics. The first is that many banks and funds bought up much of the trailer park real estate a while ago, now charge everyone out the wazoo for rent. So now in some areas, a trailer home is effectively a luxury. The second is that in 2019, the amount of employed homeless people went up. I forget the exact numbers. I think it was from 25% to 40%. And it wasn't because homeless people were getting jobs. Yeah, it's just good data there. There's going to be a lot of, effects from this for the foreseeable future. We're going to see all sorts of, bubbles and unintended consequences in ways that I don't think anybody's expecting. Want to know says, who voted for the CDC? They weren't even on the ballot. Must have been on the back. Was there a Sharpie bleed through? That's from Want to know. Peely Wally says, a good day to you, Rob, and other peoples. Just wanted to say that if governments cared so much about the lives like they claim to regarding COVID, why don't they ban the sale of cigarettes completely and alcohol too? Oh, wait, let's destroy economies for a disease with a survival rate that's high. I wouldn't trust any country leaders, including my own, with trying to work out a two-piece jigsaw. The lunatics have taken over the asylum. Right. Or how about exercise, right? How about mandatory exercise for people if they really cared about lives? Because a lot of people who are passing away from COVID have weight-related illnesses. And I don't think you're allowed to say that. I think it's illegal now. We have ATL, which I think is Atlanta says, how does the government expect landlords to have the money to keep up these properties? Well, they said that there's a big slush fund of COVID money out somewhere. And apparently the state governments have it and they're sitting in it in a bank account somewhere. I don't know. They printed a bunch of money, and I think that their solution was that it should just magically appear in your bank account, and you as a landlord should just go, oh, that solved my problems. No other concerns there at all. Of course, that didn't happen. Feisty Lady says, what would be the landlord's liability if something were to happen to the property? For example, a fully insured property is suddenly destroyed through a tragic fire, making it uninhabitable. Is the owner required to rebuild, or do you have to set up a tent on the remaining lot for the tenants? JK. Thank you, Feisty Lady. If you didn't have a JK in there, I don't know. I don't know how I would have interpreted that question, because we certainly don't want to, imply arson or something like that, but it's a funny question. Thank you for the comment. We have another one here from Jupa, says, total tyranny. Robert, if this is unconstitutional, how can these penalties against property owners be enforced? It is clear that this administration has quickly become a dictatorship, and the Dems are happily along for the ride. So as I was sort of gaming out yesterday on the show, the courts are going to have a lot of say in all of these issues, right? This is a direct conflict between the executive branch and the Supreme Court, which is our judicial branch. And a lot of this stuff is going to take place in the court of law. So let's say in a battle between, the CDC comes out and says, well, we're enforcing it. SCOTUS says you can't. And you get prosecuted for, let's say, evicting somebody. And we know that there are criminal penalties associated with that, because they're in the CDC's order. They say if you kick somebody out of your property in violation of this order, 1 year in jail, $100,000 fine. We talked about that yesterday. So if that happens, if somebody's living in your property, you throw them out, DOJ through Merrick Garland, they come and get you and nab you up. They take you into a court. They say, we're charging you with this crime. And you submit a motion. That was an illegal order. It was an unconstitutional order, judge. That judge is now going to be responsive to the Supreme Court, not to the Justice Department. That's the executive branch. So there is still a little bit of a firewall there, provided that the Supreme Court does something about this. Maybe they won't, right? Maybe they'll say, oh, it's COVID, like everything else. Vienticus Prime says, I never looked into it, but a while ago I was curious about how all these moratoriums and restricting of business hours fall under eminent domain, even if temporary. What are your thoughts on that, if this hasn't been talked about already? So I didn't really see it in the term of sort of eminent domain, like what the government was doing was being framed as a taking, where they would have to give you just compensation for any of that. All of this was really done under the government's emergency powers to sort of regulate public health. This is a governmental emergency, and so they just have other exceptions. They don't have to use, eminent domain is a little bit more routine. It's like, we want to build a freeway and we need your houses. Okay, so there's a tried and true mechanism for taking that property away from you, just compensation, all sorts of case law and all that stuff. So it really wasn't used in that manner, this legal doctrine. It was all brought about by the government's special powers. And I mean, literally, I talked about a while ago when COVID was first coming, we had a gym that was being closed here, and he filed this under a lot of these different claims, filed a request for an injunction to stop the closure of this man's gyms, and the courts just came back out, and I read through the opinion, and I looked, there is no legal basis for it, what they were doing. They're just saying it's COVID, the governor has a bunch of powers, and so he can do it whatever he wants. And that was happening all across the states. And we spent a lot of time talking about the election litigation lawsuits. What was the basis for moving things around, for changing deadlines, for just waiving, COVID. Nothing else. It's an emergency. These are trying times, and so we're just going to make the changes and deal with it if you don't like it. So that's about as far as we got on that. Farmer's Daughter 4 says, crisis really brings out a person's true character. There's probably people who really struggle to pay but find a way, while others who can easily afford it don't. Right. Because what are the consequences? And especially, what is the consequence for landlords who have multiple tenants now? Do they have, or is it their responsibility to go sue and recoup all of the damages that they've lost? So the government is putting a burden on them to be the government's housing managers? Because they can't do it? All right. So, makes my blood boil. All right. We've got another one here from Todd. Todd Trout says, Rob, we have spent trillions of dollars of stimulus so people can pay their rent, but they have spent it on other things. The government has it backwards. We should teach people to fish instead of just giving them the fish. Yes, I love that, Todd. I love that. I agree with that through and through. All right, we got some super chats that came in. Want to make sure we don't miss these. We've got one from Claire. Nice super chat. Says, I have a property management company that relies on people paying their rent for us to operate. Yes, a company that does this. We don't manage huge complexes owned by big corporations. I have employees that count on me for their livelihood. Yes. Yes, it's an entire business, and it's a very valuable business. Look around your town. There are many people that are living in apartments, providing housing. There are housing crises all over the country. And the government is shattering the entire supply chain of this. Probably intentionally. Thank you for that, Claire. We have Susie Kazarin says, draconian landlords, some people have been living for free for a year. I totally agree with you. If I said draconian landlords, which I probably did, I was probably being facetious, right? They're not draconian. These are everyday Americans. Essentially small business owners, most of them. They have an extra property because they upgraded, right? They buy a starter house, they move into a bigger house, they rent the old one out, and that enables another family to get a house that maybe they couldn't provide otherwise. If BlackRock, for example, bought that property and inflated the prices up dramatically. What the Democrats are doing in the name, they do this all the time. What they're doing in the name of empathy and care and the humanitarian thing to do, we're just trying to help people stay in their homes. It's the long-term consequences of this those people are going to be more hurt than anybody, right? Their credits are going to probably be wrecked. They're going to, be totally underwater. They should have, the government is incentivizing them. It's causing them to fail. And it's going to blame the people who are trying to be productive in society. Atlas shrugged, right? We have, thank you, Susie, for that. We have Ravich Gianatrong says, so let me get this straight. I'm a restaurant owner in New York, so this whole time I could have just not paid for my rent. I don't think so. I think it's residential, but your home, your home, or if you're renting a place or you're living in an apartment, that's what I'm saying. You could have done that. And I'm sure there are many people that have done that made a conscious decision to just say, well, not going to pay. Why should I? Why should they? We have Want to Know back over from Local says, landlords in Portland only get 80% or nothing after waiting a long time. Some cases now, if people move out, landlords don't get anything. Government says sue them. Yeah, so the burden is back on the landlords. It's not appropriate. Sharon Quidney says, I've been saying this for the past 6 months. We no longer live in a constitutional republic. It's a totalitarian dictatorship with Cuba as an exemplar. As you pointed out with regard to the redistribution of housing. USA, rest in peace. Yeah. It is. It's a redistribution of housing. And Tucker Carlson last night said that this was a nationalization of the housing markets. He's not wrong about that. We have another one here from Speech Unleashed says, the tactic the Dems are using with the eviction moratorium is the same tactic they used to try to push through a spending bill or a budget bill by claiming if it hadn't passed, then the government will shut down. People won't get their Social Security checks. They are counting on people's fears. Well, it works. They shut down the whole stinking world over fear. So, yeah, it works. It works well. Sweet Potato says Bill Gates is the largest private farm landowner in the U.S. Even as they go full communist, it's rules for thee, but not for me. If they really believed in what they were doing with real estate, they would distribute the land Bill Gates owns. Not saying I want that to happen, but just saying, bro, bro, I feel like that a lot, Sweet Potato. A lot. I go on, I look at the headlines, I'm like, bro, are you serious? Same on Twitter, but you're in good company. We're in good company, I think. A lot of people are with us. Davis says, what exactly does SCOTUS get to go on summer vacation with the elementary schoolers? Why do they? Isn't it their job to participate in the system of checks and balances and stop this nonsense from happening? It is. Yes, it is supposed to be. That's how it was originally written. We'll see what the Supreme Court does. If we have a real Supreme Court, they are going to backhand the White House so stinking hard that it leaves a mark, metaphorically, legally speaking, because they deserve it. What they did is snub their noses right at the Supreme Court. My gosh, could you imagine if Trump did it? We have Sharon Quidney says, and there will be no end to take over until they turn the USA into Cuba. We're going to have Delta, followed by Epsilon, followed by Zeta, Eta. Wonder what they'll do when they run out of Greek letters. Well, I talked about this on Twitter yesterday. I said, well, we have Delta now. We have a Delta Plus is coming. I'm looking forward to Delta Prime, which will be a good one. You get that really quickly, like overnight, or a matter of hours if you upgrade to Delta Prime Plus. You could also have a Delta Pro Max is probably going to be another one, and a Delta Ultra might be another good one. So a lot of good features coming along the way. Many upgrades. You know, who knows? Yeah, probably have a lot of those. We have I'm Not Gas says, compounding this is Janet Yellen seems to be directing states to disperse their rental assistance payments based solely on being low income. Why don't they disperse it to the landlords that are owed the money? Well, we know this is there to enrich their institutional banking friends like BlackRock, using an army of poor, helpless people as their political shield. Yeah, BlackRock, right? All of these pseudo-governmental private companies where we've got this mixture now, sort of this integration. Anything that the federal government cannot do, they just outsource that to the big tech companies, to the private corporations, and they go do those things. And the American people suffer as a result. We have Joe Biden is a racist, says that the moratorium is horrible and we need to replace the representatives on the local and state level so that we can fortify the election as well as remove critical race theory and propagate populism. Need to remove all the rhino and Democrats so we can purge the government peacefully. Ideally, the government is reduced. You can't keep doing the same moratorium and print money with no labor and expect the U.S. to survive. Yeah. It's a good point. Joe Biden is a racist. I think you're onto something there. I like what you said. We have Sharon says, hey, on the other hand, look on the bright side. If the government confiscates your property in this manner, they can take over the mortgage payments. And of course, that would keep you from having to pay property taxes. A significant deal in states like California and New York. Sharon, looking at the glass half full. You know, it's really hard to think about mortgage payments and sort of, it's hard to think in general. It's really a taxing thing to do these days. You got to question something and think about alternative theories and use logic and reason. It's a lot of work. It's much easier to just say, what do you have to say, Brian Stelter? Tell me what to do, Andrew Cuomo. Please help me, Washington Post. Oh, what's Dr. Fauci? Oh, okay, I'm just going to go do all of that. Then you don't have to think anymore. Think about how nice this would be if you don't have to actually use your brain. Life will be much easier. So just let the government take care of all of it for us. Sharon, you're not going to own anything. You're going to be happy about it. Jeremy Matrita is here. What's up, Jeremy? Says, I think that it's great the Supreme Court has finally stepped in and did their job. We'll see. Some might see this ruling as outrageous or out of line but they are just exercising their constitutional duty to provide the country some checks and balances. Yes. So that's provided that they actually come and do finalize that ruling, right? We know where they stand on it. They've already given us a ruling on it. We still need them to come out and smack what the government did hard because it was unconstitutional and it should not be allowed. Kenny 1B says, the governor of New Mexico disbanded an entire elected school board for refusing to impose mask mandates. What is going on in this country? Well, it's a good question, Kenny 1B. I don't know what's going on with that story, but it doesn't surprise me a bit. We're seeing that, I think, all over the place. Joe Biden is horrible, says the housing moratorium is horrible, and it's just an excuse to transfer Oh, I think I read that one. Okay, so small property owners won't give bribes, book deals, or speech money to Joe Biden. Yeah, gosh, I know. Another one here from Justice Obsessed says, as at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, do you think this is part of a bigger plan? A lot of landlords are choosing to sell all of a sudden. BlackRock is coming in, buying up all the properties. In the end, it would become government property. Yeah, so I don't think it's a conspiracy theorist at all, right? I think that these are market forces at work, and you're just noticing it, right? You're watching all of these things happen. Folks, there is a lot of money to be made in times like these, right? In times of crises. When you go back and you look at all of the robber barons, some of the early capitalists here in the United States, like the Van Burens and the Rockefellers, and all of the steels and oils and the railroads and all of that stuff, is a lot of those are sort of happened during transitionary eras in the United States. Fortunes were made over decades as society was realigning. That's happening right now. We're seeing that with the same. It's not the Rockefellers or the Van Burens. It's the Bezos, it's the Gates, it's the Zuckerbergs, it's the Google people, and they're all doing it, right? It's all of the people who are at that upper echelon. They're seeing food for the taking, and they are going and getting it, and we're observing it. It's not conspiracy theory anymore. Look around. You can look at the numbers of what BlackRock is doing, and you can see that. Great point, Justice Obsessed. Thank you for that. We have Vienticus Prime says, follow up on the eminent domain question. Even though these are being done under the doctrine of emergency powers, are the emergency powers mutually exclusive from eminent domain? Can an emergency action exist under eminent domain? So first and foremost, this is not my area of practice. If I'm answering this, I'm digging back to my law school days. But can an emergency action exist under eminent domain? So I think I understand what you're saying. Yes, I think that the answer would be yes. Harkening back to my property law, right? The government, I think historically has said, had like emergency condemnations and things like that, where they just say that is too dangerous. We have to seize that and demolish that building. We'll settle up with you after the fact, right? We're going to take your property. We're going to sort of sever your rights to keep that building up, and we're going to knock that building down. You can sue us. We're going to talk about just compensation on the back end of things, but we're not going to let you keep this property up and sort of, let this linger on for 18 months in courts. We're going to take care of that. And we're going to do it under emergency powers, and that stuff gets worked out in court after the fact. I think that's where you're going with that question. We have Democrats love Jim Crow. Says the housing moratorium is horrible. COVID is tyrannical. I think I've already read this. I wonder if Kamala can push Joe down the stairs in Roblox. No, that's no, we always preach nonviolence here. Oh, in Roblox. I think that's a video game. Impeach Kamala while putting Trump as Speaker of the House. I think Roblox is a game, isn't it? Sergeant Bob says at first an emergency, okay. Now something to just deal with. Changed. Yeah, Sergeant Bob. Yeah. The first go round, I think a lot of people were a little bit, angry, but acknowledging that this was an emergency. Now everybody's just angry because they know it's all not accurate. Sweet Potato says, can you just do, quote, routine maintenance like every day for them with the proper legal notice? Make it real annoying. So I don't know. I know that there are all sorts of renters' bill of rights that kind of exist in property law throughout the countries. And so you can't, probably not, Sweet Potato, right? Depends on how you do it. But I'm going to guess probably not, right? I'm not a property person, but good question. It's Ed says, hey, Rob, in Chicago, this is creating a slight housing bubble. It's a seller's market. Same here in Arizona. Prices are going up almost 25% in some areas. This time next year, prices will plummet and people will have to bear the burden of these idiots making illegal laws in the spirit of taking care of others. I hope someone studies the long-term effects of this and bashes Biden in the future. Yeah, so it's Ed. I think that's kind of what I've been speculating as well, right? If there are a lot of people who are in properties that they're not paying for and they're all going to be evicted, and like in Arizona, a lot of people are moving to Arizona, but there are no houses. There are no places to rent. So my hypothesis was, well, maybe there's a bunch of people who are living in houses that they should not be living in because they're not paying their bills. What happens when they all get evicted? What does that do to our very inflated housing market where our prices are high because there's no supply? A lot of demand, no supply. What happens if 7 million people are evicted and suddenly we have an overabundance of supply and not any demand? All of those markets and property values come crashing down. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I could suspect as such. Lauren S. says, Rob, people are still responsible for current rent while they're told to pay back the past 18 months. School is starting for children across the country. Homelessness is already a problem. Where do they think these families are going to go once put out? It's a good question, Lauren. I don't know, right? I don't know. I don't know where they're going to go. And I guess that's kind of what the government is saying. Well, we don't know either. So they created a problem that they don't have a solution for, right? They're going to get evicted regardless, right? If you're a landlord and you suddenly you had a person living in your property for the last 18 months that you couldn't evict, and they were not paying you rent for 18 months, and suddenly you get a check from the government or they pay all their back rent, right? What's the likelihood that that landlord is going to say, you can keep living there, we're going to re-up this lease next time? Probably not. I don't know where they're going to go, Lauren S. And quite frankly, that's not everybody's problem. That's not our problem. It is now because the government made it our problem, but historically it's not our problem. Okay, we can't fix this for everybody. People have to figure out where to live on their own. They can go back and move in with families. They can room up together. They can do all sorts of things. There are other solutions. They found a place to live in 2019 pretty fine. We didn't have a problem like this before 2019. The government closed everybody down. The government made sure that things like this could happen, inflating the bubbles and making and causing all of these disruptions in the markets. So it's going to take some time to figure it out, or not. Or the government is just going to say, we're going to continue to extend this indefinitely, and everybody can just now live in the new property that we have absconded. Not a good solution. But I empathize with you, Lauren, right? I don't want families, I was raised by a single mom. We didn't have much. We could have been caught in something like this. And it's a sad thing. But I'll tell you this, my mom would have been paying her rent every stinking month. So I'm not sure, I'm not sure that I have a lot of empathy for people who just say, well, I'm not going to work. I'm going to go get a boat. I'm going to take a year off. That's not appropriate at all. And we shouldn't have to foot the bill for that. And we shouldn't have to do it at the expense of property rights that are fundamental to this country. All right. We got a couple more questions before we move over. 3 Girly says, John Jay is rolling over in his grave. Yes, talking about the founding father. He was also in the Federalist Papers, wasn't he? Or maybe the anti-federal. I forget what side he was on. John Jay. Yeah. No new buyers will want to invest in property markets soon enough if the government is in their back gardens peering through their windows. It's another very important point here, right? I know this is not a real estate show, but it is an important point. If your second property, if your investment property is now a dangerous investment because the government can come and seize it from you, people are not going to do that anymore, right? And so we may see a lot less housing because people are buying properties to create rental properties as investments so that other people can go in there and rent. So people just say, well, we're not going to build houses anymore because the government's just going to take it. All right. Lauren says, hey, Rob, relationship status with your landlord is what this is going to boil down to, in my opinion. I feel like mom and pop landlords will be fair if the relationship is good, but complexes and high rises won't. I agree with that, Lauren. I think that is a solution to a lot of our issues in this country, more, sort of local solutions. Hey, just work it out with your landlord. Work it out. But the government coming in and telling people, you don't have to work it out. We're going to work it out for you. That's the problem, because it incentivizes people to let things get bad like they are right now. If the government just said, look, sorry, I know it's COVID, but you have to figure it out. Move in with your family. Sorry, make do. Go to your church. Go to your local, shelter. Figure that out. I'm pretty sure we would have been just fine. The government caused the bubble. They caused the lockdowns. They caused all of this stuff. And so now people are not incentivized to build those relationships. Frustrating. We have It's Ed says, Rob, don't forget about Delta LTE and Delta 5G. I forgot about the 5G Delta. Yeah, I forgot about that. Looks like the Lambda variant is totally vaccine resistant. That's not medical information. That's just a passing comment, right? We don't know about any of that medical stuff here. Article on Very Well Health, though, if you want to look that up. Delta LTE, Delta 5G, yeah, fast, really fast. You get good. You get good speeds with those. Realtor Patty says, a landlord can do routine maintenance. A landlord has to give the renters notice. That's from Realtor Patty, giving us some real estate talk. We got Speech Unleashed says, I thought the whole point of the extended and extra unemployment was to help people afford things. so much that people are refusing to work because they get more money to stay home. So why wouldn't they have the money to pay their rent? Because speech, they were spending it on boats, man. They were out there partying it up. They were taking a year off. They're getting free money and they don't have to pay their rent. Are you kidding me? It's a vacation. It's a government vacation. COVID, don't have to go to work from home, check in every now and then, probably still get a paycheck from them also. So the government is causing this. Yes. All right. A couple more. Three Girlies says John Jay was the first. And yes, he was. Yes, thank you for that. John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, one of the authors of the Federalist Papers. That's right. Federalist. Yeah. Thank you, Three Girlies. And the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Yeah, I knew that too. All right, I'm getting giddy on this segment. We got to move on to the next segment. All right, Shay O'Shea says, aloha, Rob. I just took the July bar exam out here in July. We have a harsh homelessness problem as it is. And I know that landlords out here are starting to push tenants out extrajudicially. I can't give legal advice until I'm licensed, but is there anything new lawyers can do to get involved? I'm interested in advocating on behalf of both good landlords getting screwed by their tenants and good tenants getting screwed by their bad landlords. What would you do if you were a new lawyer starting your new career during all this pandemonium? So, it's a good question. That's an interesting question, because that's an interesting area of law where you're sort of picking both sides. So my first instinct on this is that it's hard to split the middle on something like that. So it would almost be like me analogizing to say, well, in some cases I defend you against criminal charges, and in some cases I'll prosecute you. I want to prosecute the bad criminals, but I also want to defend the good people. Right? There's a little bit of a contradiction there. I'm interested in helping the good landlords, and I'm interested in helping good tenants. I think that from a marketing perspective, from a firm development, from a for a consistency thing, if you're very interested in property law in this area, I might pick a side. And if you're interested in why, there's a great book that I'm going to refer you to. It's called Your Stand is Your Brand by Patrick Gentempo. And he talks about these little contradictions. Now, I appreciate what you're trying to do here. You're trying to help people, right? You're trying to help good people solve their legal problems, help good landlords, help good tenants. But you're going to have some difficulty there, I think, working on both sides of that coin. I would read Your Stand is Your Brand. Think through what your stand is going to be before you start your practice. Get very clear on what that is. And be articulate with that. If it's going to be for landlords, what are you fighting for landlords? Property rights, dang it. It's their property. What are you fighting for if you're representing the tenants? Livelihood, a home, the American dream, right? And so you identify what those are and stick hard to that. That would be my thought. And the more you speak out and the more you get behind that passion, the more response you'll get. Congratulations on passing the bar. Good luck. I'm sure you passed it. Love it. Love it. We had two attorneys here who just took the bar, and they're excited as hell. They have this sort of the post-bar exam glow. We made it. We survived. So that's a lot of fun. We have a farmer's daughter says, not to toot my own horn here, but we are debt-free. I used it to pay everything off. That's amazing. That's an amazing thing. A couple super chats that just came in from, we got a couple more. Sorry, I missed these. Says, this one from Leah says, my question is, are they going to extend this insane unemployment? Yeah, probably, right? Because it's going to be on the same justification. Oh, we're still kind of locked down again. We still got people who are not vaxxed, and we got to just continue to support people. Because if you don't, you're a monster. We have Random Globetrotter says, the Fed won't taper mortgage-backed securities, so the bubble won't go away until at least 2023. The supply release will help deflate rental values temperature. Interesting. Yeah, see, so that sounds like a person who really knows what they're talking about. So it's complicated. We have, thank you for that, Random. Brody Z says the government is creating multiple bubbles that will crash an economy. Yeah, I think that is sort of without any question that there's a lot of that happening in many different markets all over the place. All of those questions came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com and over from YouTube. Big shout outs to Brody Z, Random Globetrotter. We had Ilea Ravitch. We have Susie, again, for all the super chats. Claire in the house with a lot of love and support. I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for watching. Before you head out, I want to just remind you that I am a criminal defense lawyer here in Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I We've got a long history of helping good people facing criminal charges to find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and beyond that in their lives. Our phone number for a free case evaluation is 480-787-0394. You can also find us online at www.rrlawaz.com. We can help with any type of criminal charge in the state of Arizona. Things like DUI, drug offenses, misdemeanor offenses. And we can also help with clearing up old case records, like expunging cases or making sure that you can restore your rights so that you can vote again or possess a firearm again or apply for some other federal benefits. We can remove mugshots off the internet. Basically, anytime that you or somebody you know or love is in trouble with the law in the state of Arizona, we have an amazing team of people. We would just love the opportunity to help. And our phone number, of course, 480-787-0394. And if you don't need any legal services, that's a very good thing. But you may be interested in some informational offerings so that you are prepared if you do have to deal with the police. And of course, I want to invite you to head on over to gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. You'll notice here, I've got several different trainings that are available, including the law enforcement interaction training. This is the 1, 2, 3 rule for dealing with the police. It's one rule you need, 2 questions that the police can ask of you, and 3 responses if they ask you a problematic question. So that's available now. You can also get a load at my personal productivity system here called Existence Systems. Fun little course. And then we have here, if you're a lawyer or a legal professional, be sure to check out this program. We are meeting twice every month. Again, all of this over at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. And if none of that sounds any good to you, well, just go ahead and give us a follow, because I'm working on some other products and some other offerings. And of course, if you have not already done so, want to invite you one more time to head on over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. It's where you can support the show, and it's where we can connect. We've got monthly Zoom meetings and a lot of other goodies coming up. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for watching and for all of your love and support. I will see you on the next one.